by Shimon ben Shetach. I mean, nowhere in the Torah does it say to give a ketubah. It says to give a get, not a ketubah. I mean, you could go through the motions. You could give her a ring, but Jewish law that wouldn't recognize a Jew marrying a non-Jewish woman. Now, mind you, conversion back then, that really took a few days. And this is what people did and Jews did throughout history. As they migrated, they would meet women, convert into Judaism, and marry them. This is one of the things that led to the Argentinian community outlawing conversions in 1905 because men were pretty much just taking women and converting them. So I mean, they had the smart plan to just outlaw conversions in general. Which basically just got people to marry Gentiles. And stuff.
Can you get if you wanted to have a get, like let's say you were divorced from someone, it was a regular traditional Jewish wedding, and you wanted to get a get, but you didn't want to have to communicate with that person. Can you do it by yourself, or does the other person have to be part of it for it to be binding?
No, you could get what's called a shaliach. Like you get a messenger. We go through rabbis to do this. I mean, most people don't write out, their own getting. When you go to give a get, so the procedure goes like this. You walk in and then you'll see that there's a sofer there. There's a scribe, because a get is written on 13 lines on parchment, just like a Torah scroll is written. There's a dayan and then there's another witness there. And that's it. He writes it. They fold it up. And first you take ownership of it. And then you give him some halachic power of attorney that allows him to deliver the get to the woman in question.
So she still does have to get contacted in some form, I guess.
Right. However...
Yeah, I guess I was trying to get creative with that one. I was just curious.
This brings up an interesting topic that's till now, I haven't heard anyone speak about it before. The notion of Agunim. And I don't know if you guys heard of Agunot. But Agunim would be men who are chained. In the Ashkenazi world, or for example, we know the whole notion of Agunot, right? So Agunot are women who can't get divorces because their husbands won't grant them a divorce. The rabbis throughout the centuries have come up with many creative ways to try to either annul a marriage or in many cases, and the Talmud even encourages this, to be kofar a get, to force a man to give a get by basically beating him up. Now, one of the biggest rabbis who ever existed in the Ashkenazi world was Rabbeinu Gershom Me'or HaGolah. But anyways, he made a cherem, a takana, to prohibit polygamy, and made another one that a woman must accept a get in order for a divorce to actually take place. Now, this is clearly against the halakha. The halakha is that as long as the get reaches the woman's domain, you are divorced. In other words, if there isn't a prohibition of polygamy, this really wouldn't be an issue because a Sephardic rabbi could issue the get, and whether the woman accepts it or not, it's not going to stop you from getting remarried because you're allowed to have more than one wife, even if she accepts it or not. But of course, it's not a requirement according to halakha for the woman to accept it. But according to Ashkenazi Judaism, the woman has to accept the get, and there's many men out there who go through the same things that the Agunot go through. In other words, there's many men that the reason they don't want to give a get is because their wife's family is very wealthy. And they'll say something, fine, I'll give you a get if you give me $1 million. And the people will pay because the woman wants to remarry. If a woman remarries when she's not properly divorced, her kids are mamzerim. I mean, there's a big problem. So in the same way, there's women who hold out now because according to Ashkenazi Judaism, the woman has to accept the get for the man to be able to remarry. So there's many Ashkenazim who don't put up with this and become Sephardi for a week here just so they could get divorced. But this is something that people never talk about. And there's a lot of men who suffer through it and people think that it's only one way. Right. But it was because Rabbeinu Gershom, he outlawed polygamy in the Ashkenazi world for 1,000 years. That, mind you, he lived probably 1,050 years ago, I believe. So that prohibition also expired. But being that it's prohibited in America and prohibited in Israel, although when Israel allowed the Sephardic Jews to enter in 1948 and 1956, they told them that they were allowed to keep their additional wives because in the Sephardic world before the state of Israel was established, Jews had multiple wives and they immigrated to the land of Israel with multiple wives. I'm happy with one woman, but it's actually a Torah command in many cases to be a polygamist. In other words, in terms, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the whole process of chalitza, the levirate marriage. Basically, a widow who, when her husband passed away, didn't have children with him yet. She's called a yevama. In this case, she's expected to marry her husband's brother and procreate with him. Now this, according to the narrative in Torah and even according to the halakha, is lehatila. This is the ideal, to go through the process of what's called yibum. And what's actually done nowadays instead of, which is also acceptable but not ideal, is the process of chalitza. Right, the whole process with the shoe and the spitting, and I'm sure you guys know how it goes. As a matter of fact, there's a whole masechet that deals with this, known as Masechet Yevamot.
Does anybody practice that today?
No. Well, this is what they do. Like those who really want to fulfill the mitzvah, they'll go through the process, right, of the levirate marriage, get remarried to this additional person, and divorce him right away. So that's
why?
illegal, because it's illegal to like in many countries to have an extra wife.
That's what I mean. Why go through the process?
It's because the Torah wants you to. I mean, the Torah is almost encouraging that this is what's called lechatchila, versus bediavad. In other words, it's the ideal thing to do, and the not ideal thing to do is go through the whole process where